We call this week holy. I have part one, and Jody will follow with part two. All the stories I tell you are true. 1981, Queens, New York. It's the Saturday before Palm Sunday. And the matriarch of the congregation phones me, "Pastor, did you get the palms from the florist?" And I say, "Palms? Florist? I'm sorry, Gladys, but nobody informed me that I was supposed to get palms from the florist. I assumed the floral arrangement committee, FAC, I just created a committee, was in charge of that." "Oh, no, Pastor, it's the tradition that the pastor always gets the palms, the leafy palms." "I'm surprised you didn't know this." And I'm thinking to myself, I must have been sick that day in seminary when the worship professor said and reminded the class of freshman students, "Pastors always get the palms on Palm Sunday," but I somehow failed to miss that class. So I hoof it to the florist just a couple blocks away. And, of course, on Saturday, all the leafy palms are gone. But there are large quantities of long, narrow strips of palms that are about an inch wide, and they are curved to a sharpened point at the end, and they're sometimes rather stiff. And they're actually called, it's kind of scary, they're called palm spears. And it's the word spears that should frighten you a little bit. They're palm spears. I take 100 of them, I had to. Okay, Sunday morning, I'm distributing the palm spears to the congregation that is clearly annoyed that its pastor has, in 6 months' time, failed a most major assignment. And to add to the already bad karma, I hand out, it was a rookie mistake, I handed out the palm spears to about a dozen youngsters who were among the congregation. And suddenly, they run up and down the aisle, and a girl I'm not making this up, I never do. The girl sticks the spear into another kid's ear, and there's tears. And another boy is bawling because his palm spear cracked the minute he wanted to torture someone with it. And it is absolute Palm Sunday chaos. I hope I know you well enough, and if I don't, please forgive me. It took me 2 days and that many bottles of wine to come to my senses again and show my face in that little church. So yeah, I might have some mixed feelings about Palm Sunday. In large part, mixed feelings because I think Palm Sunday, as we read it and oftentimes try to mimic it, is so orchestrated and staged. It starts with Jesus entering Jerusalem. I don't know my directions here, but I'm going to make this east. Jesus entering Jerusalem from the east, from the village of Bethany, a few miles away from Jerusalem. And he comes in on a donkey. And on the other side of town, it's not mentioned in the text, but on the other side of town from the west, and you have to keep in mind this is Passover week, so in Passover week, the celebrations, the crowd in Jerusalem swells by tens of thousands, all right? So Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, has to order his troops, his minions, to ride in on horses and to keep the crowd tamed and controlled. So you have these two events happening at one time, basically. Jesus coming in from the east, the Roman soldiers coming into the west, and the soldiers, of course, are daring the members of the crowd to defy them in any way so that they can kind of smack down on them. So there are people lining this Jerusalem parade welcoming Jesus, and they obviously, when they see Jesus on a donkey, they obviously, because they have the sacred text ingrained in them from Zechariah, who predicted some years before, quote, "Rejoice and shout, all people. Behold, your king comes bringing salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey." We can look that up in the portion of Scripture we call the Old Testament. And the crowd, in my imagination, begins to connect the dots of their tradition. This Jesus might be the one we've been waiting for. This Jesus might be the one who, for our benefit, will dismantle and disarm the Roman oppressors. He's already performed miracles of healing, miracles of seeing, and some have even testified that he's walked on water, right? So they cheer, and they chant, and they cry out, and they cast off their cloaks, and they strip their coats, and they make a pathway of cushioned palm leaves for Jesus upon which to ride. And this is the one that they hope will send the Roman oppressors running. You just wait. Jesus will do it. He will set us free. Jerusalem will be ours once again, sending back over the borders those ne'er-do-wells and certainly those undocumented undesirables who've feasted on our city far too long. This donkey-riding liberator is the one who will finally set us free from the Roman boot stuck on our necks. And this Galilean will be the antidote to relieve the oppressive taxes that Rome has imposed upon us. So they cheer, and they cheer some more, and they cheer a little bit more. Hail! Hail! The king is here! But in a few days, they will shout something else. Because this is not only Palm Sunday, it is also Passion Week. Jesus had a passion for God's best intentions for the world. And sometimes it's just too much for people to embrace God's intentions. That the blind might see, that the lost might be found, the last might be first, the crooked ways might be made straight, the hungry might be fed rather than scorned, the humble might be exalted rather than ridiculed, the downtrodden might be lifted up rather than kicked further down, the lonely might not be lonely anymore. Who can bear such a message? Kathleen Norris reminds us, in the suspicious atmosphere of the contemporary church, it is good to know one's ground. Jesus knew his ground. But as I said in the opening, the Palm Sunday is not the full story of this week. Not by a long shot. We hear the rest of the story.
We call this Sunday Passion Sunday as well, because during this time we hear about Jesus' suffering, his pain. It's interesting, isn't it, that the same people who wave the palms and throw their cloaks down and follow Jesus into the city chanting like he's a hero will in just a few days say, "Kill him. Kill him." Later in the week, after this parade, Jesus and his friends will make provisions for the Passover supper. The Passover is a reminder in the Jewish tradition of God's liberating power from slavery. And Jesus will celebrate this supper with his disciples, all of them. The one who will betray him, the one who will deny him, the rest of them who will flee when he's in trouble. And after that meal, Jesus decides, he knows they're coming after him. It's time to reconnect, as was Jesus' habit, to go into the mountain and pray. He goes into the mountain with a few of his closest friends who promptly fall asleep, too much wine. And Jesus sweats. Drops of blood, the story goes. So anxious is he. Despite the lack of support from his supposed besties, he's finally come to the point where he can surrender to God's will. I wonder if his awareness of the presence of God, as close as the blood running through his veins, keeps him grounded. If that were all, later that night Jesus is arrested. One of his disciples draws his sword and slices off the ear of a soldier. Jesus reprimands that disciple, heals the ear. I wonder if his focus on his mission, his emphasis on nonviolence, on love above all, keeps him grounded. He's brought before the authorities who will determine that he has to die. While he's being stripped and whipped and spit on and in chains, another of Jesus' closest friends within earshot swears he does not know the man. The only ones who can actually sentence Jesus to death are the Romans, and so the religious authorities bring Jesus to the Romans. And there's an alliance that's built between King Herod and Pilate, who you heard about earlier, over this Jesus, who they will throw out to the people, who then are yelling, "Crucify him, crucify him." Beaten, humiliated, forced to carry his own cross to the hill where crucifixions take place. What keeps Jesus grounded through this horror? Dan and I have been listening to a book by Jonathan Egg. It recalls the struggle that Martin Luther King Jr. had in remaining steadfast in the cause of anti-racism. His own people weren't clear about his tactics and were divided. The local and state authorities in the South made life difficult for him. The Northerners were not always supportive. King was young and inexperienced. He was overworked. He was regularly imprisoned. He received death threats on a continuous basis. He was hospitalized for fatigue. Egg recounts King's struggles incident by incident. And Egg points to the source of King's ability to keep going. Egg includes the letters King wrote and the sermons he preached and the speeches he gave. They record King's source of strength. King was grounded in the truth that racism is unjust. King was grounded in nonviolence. He knew that the tools of the master cannot take down the master's house. King was grounded in his faith that the dream of God is a society that works for all. But King was also realistic about the toll his prophetic behavior was taking on him. Regularly, he ruminates on the very real threat on his life. He reflects on the possibility that he will be murdered. Malcolm X was, many of his friends were, his followers were, protesters were. And King believed that if he were to be murdered, a very likely possibility, his life could be a redemptive sacrifice in the cause of justice and freedom. His death, while tragic, could be seen as the culmination of his commitment to justice. He, King himself, emphasized standing up for justice, even if one's life was threatened. Egg suggests this is what kept King grounded. King said that a person dies when they refuse to stand up for what is right. Jesus certainly knew that his death could be redemptive, that using violence was not, and that death was not the end. Jesus knew that a life worth being martyred for was a life worth living, so he stood his ground. Now, on the Friday we call good, Jesus was put to death by capital punishment. And now you know the rest of the story. We go from this place today with the complete story, the story that a life lived fully in the ways of love, confronting the unjust ways that keep people oppressed, the wrongly focused expectations of a people that might makes right, and the truth that being grounded in love can move one toward a redemptive sacrifice. Kathleen Norris wrote, "In the suspicious atmosphere of the contemporary Christian church, it's good to know one's ground." This is our journey in this last week of Lent, the journey toward death, toward our own death, and exploring how we stand our ground. What is our mission of love? How will we stand with Jesus?